Hi, I'm Dave Armlin, the VP of Customer Success and Solutions Architecture, and I'm here today with Christopher Penn, the co-founder and chief data scientist at TrustInsights.ai. Christopher, thanks for being with us. We're really glad to have you here with us today.
I'm happy to be here and love talking about analytics and data and fun stuff that you can do with it.
Love it. Well, this program is about data at scale. We talk to data legends like yourself who are handling, problems of scaling data to, epic proportions and bringing new tech to it. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys have built at Trust Insights and, a little bit about your journey with data and how you came to think about the invention that you brought to bear in the company that you founded, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, so we're a management consulting firm. We're, despite the domain name, not a software company yet, although we may take some of our stuff eventually and productize it. But what we do is we help mostly marketers make their data work better for them. And what's interesting about marketing in particular is that marketing has a ton of data to work with, but it typically fails at least one of the 6 C's of data. Those 6 C's that we call the 6 C's. It's clean, right? Is your data clean? Marketing data, if it comes from human beings, it's not clean. Is it complete? Again, issues with completion. Is it correct? Right, which is a major one. Is it comprehensive? Does it answer the questions that it's being asked of it? Marketing is notorious for being bad at this. One of the things that people ask all the time is, what's the ROI of this? Well, to have ROI, you need revenue and you need your expenses. And because marketing has done a generally poor job of working with finance in the past, finance has not been very forthcoming with that data, and you can't do ROI without financial data. Is the data chosen well, meaning that you've gotten rid of the extraneous stuff to the extent that you can? And is it calculable? Is it usable by both machines and humans? And so a lot of the focus that we help our clients with is around, hey, you've got all this data, you're trying to be data driven, but you either don't have the right data, you don't have the right tools, or you don't have the right people and processes to make what you want to do come to life.
Got it. Great. So, with that, in those 6 C's, it sounds like there's certainly, a lot of products and tools and data sources in the mix. And, with what you're doing at Trust Insights, what types of tools and tooling are you using in that journey? And how do you attack problems? Are you handling all the 6 C's, or tell me a little about the types of things that you have to do there?
It's funny because, again, with marketing, a good portion of the source data is actually out of marketers' control. So, for example, the most popular tool that folks know is Google Analytics. You don't own that software when you use it, right? You don't own the data. You don't have control over the data or what comes out of Google's APIs. And so marketers are in a situation where there's several challenges. One, they don't own the majority of the tools and the data. Two, the data comes in a bunch of heterogeneous formats. And three, marketers typically don't have the ability to blend that data and put it together. So, for example, one thing that we've done a lot of is take heterogeneous data sources and trying to feed them all into something like a BigQuery database, so that it can be normalized. You can do a little bit of machine learning on it there, but more important, report on it in a coherent fashion. A lot of the time, you take a look at something like say digs on TikTok, which is a metric of video's popularity, and then you have your CRM, and these systems, they don't talk to each other. They're so far apart from each other in the customer journey, and yet marketers, particularly stakeholders, are saying, what's the impact of my TikTok video on my sales, right? And it's like, okay, well, we got to get all the data from all these little systems, plug them together, and hope that we can come up with something that is a working model. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't.
Got it. And are you using, certain types of tools to bring those data sources together? Are things like Segment.io or Google's data flow, formerly Illuma, those types of things, or are you building tools to do the job?
We build a lot of our stuff in with open source. So Typically, obviously, we have BigQuery, we have your typical AMP stack, and the language we use most is R, because
Got
I'm
it.
old, and all the kids use Python these days. But I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, I got a
yeah,
lot of gray hair.
great.
I grew up doing C, so we
Yeah,
read a lot of our
sure.
code in R against APIs.
Great, great. Well, certainly that, what you're saying relative to bringing data together, we're doing a lot of that at Chaos Search. We see, the cloud object storage model, in Google GCS and data there, and certainly in Amazon S3. We bring data together at that level, and then, bring the tools to bear. Our first, go to market motion has been around log and event data, exposing an Elasticsearch API where people can query it via Elasticsearch, but we will be exposing data via a SQL JDBC connection very soon. And certainly talking to tools like R and other programming languages. We're big fans of Python as well. Allow people to unlock value. We have heard a great deal about, the marketing use cases that you've described. Are you also, you mentioned AI, how much is that, impacting, the types of things you're doing now, or is that more aspirational?
Um, for a lot of our clients, they're not at a point yet where they have the technological maturity and particularly the people skills for deployment of AI, except as that it's when it's already baked into a product they already use. So, for example, if you switch over to Google Analytics 4, you get GA's anomaly detection built in. Internally, we do a fair amount of machine learning in our own code because a lot of the time, there are algorithms that you can run that are compute intensive. They're not so compute intensive that you can't run them on your own hardware, but they're much more compute intensive than would be permissible from a user experience perspective in a SaaS application, right? The idea of you push a button in an analytics tool and an answer comes out is what people expect. It's like on Tinder, you swipe right and you expect
Right,
a date to appear. With a lot of machine learning techniques, there's compute time. So for example, when we're doing attribution analysis, we will often use Markov chains, and running a Markov chain modeling until you get to a point where your error rate hits below a certain percentage can take, depending on the data set, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, 5 hours, depending on how
yeah,
large the data set is. For reporting purposes, like if I was handing this off to you, you wouldn't care because you get the PowerPoint slide or whatever 2 days later. So you don't care from a end user perspective, but it doesn't really fly in the software world where you push a button and says, get a sandwich, come back in an hour.
right, and yeah, certainly our world is, we're consumerizing IT, so people are expecting, the mobile app experience that you described where you get an instant answer. So yeah, for sure. And as a company, you guys consult with folks. Do you deliver, your final product? Is it come by way of, uh, um, Google Sheets, or what's the finished product for you guys? Do you present data, in different ways for each customer, or how does it work?
It varies wildly based on the customer's level of sophistication. Some customers, we have a virtual server that's running that's actually doing, middleware we've written for them to plug back into their own systems. Other customers, here's your PowerPoint slide, right,
Got
of
it.
the results. So it's all over the board. We do encourage people to use tools like Google's free Data Studio software because the more that you can dashboard, the more that you can connect a front end system to a back end system, the less manual labor there is, the less human error there is from copying and pasting something wrong. And it empowers the user to say, okay, you can have this report now whenever you want it. If it's 3 a.m. and you're wandering around the kitchen in your bathrobe and you're like, oh gosh, I wonder what the ROI of my marketing is. You can pull up that dashboard at 3 a.m. and get the answer that you want. So to the extent that we can get people to use more interactive tools, we definitely want them to. But again, it always comes down to what is the customer most comfortable with in their own workflow.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, and certainly, I'm a huge fan. Visuals can tell a story, very, very, very quickly. The old cliche, a picture's worth 1,000 words. As you bring data to life with visuals, whether it's ROI or a security attack surface or whatever it might be, a visual can, in a dashboard or a single visual, can bring a message across quickly. And whether it's the free Google Studio or tools like Elasticsearch and Kibana, or Looker and Tableau, which we're excited to be supporting in the very near future. You can bring visuals together that tell a story with data very quickly. And I totally agree that depending on the end user and customer, you can bring different things to bear for them, but visuals and dashboards and people certainly love free. So I'm glad to hear that the Google Studio is free for folks to take advantage of. What in terms of data challenges, what are the biggest ones for you? In your engagements, and what are some trends that you're seeing, in software with companies like Chaos Search or other that are exciting to you that give you hope to make your job easier? And certainly, I know you're a consulting company with thinking about products. How does that, and the third part of the question, I guess, is, where does emerging trends in the industry kind of converge with what you're doing now and how you might productize? So there's a lot there. I mean, you can take any part of it. Just kind of planting a seed for some additional conversation as it relates to what you guys are doing.
In terms of where things are right now, marketing data itself is particularly weird, right? Like I said, it's very heterogeneous, it's very disconnected,
Yeah.
and a lot of the time the story that you tell can't come from unifying the data. The story actually comes from unifying conceptual ideas, sort of velcroing them together so that somebody can figure out what's happening. Because a lot of the times, marketing data is a lot of what happened, right? That's true of almost all analytics. What happened?
Mm-hmm.
But when we think about the hierarchy of analytics, Gartner's hierarchy, and then our extension of it, you have descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, prescriptive, and proactive analytics. Almost all of the analytics tools and software on the market today are focused on the descriptive amount. You can't do diagnostic analytics most of the time with software because you can't crawl into somebody's head and ask them why. Why did you do this thing? Why did you abandon the shopping cart? You have to actually ask the human being and say, why didn't you buy this cart full of My Little Pony toys?
Right.
And sometimes you'll get an answer, sometimes you won't.
Right.
In terms of where things are headed from a trending perspective, one of the things that is of paramount importance for legal reasons is data privacy. What's happening next year, January 1 of next year, is California's latest Privacy Act takes effect, CPRA. And that substantially challenges companies who are used to sharing data. So CCPA in 2020 prohibited the sale of customer data from one entity to another without consent. A customer has to consent to having their data sold. The new legislation says you may not share this data anymore. So if Chaos Search and TrustInsights did a webinar together and we did not obtain consent for the customer's data to go to both companies, we legally could not use it. So one of the things that's got everybody very interested right now is in essentially doing a lot of imputational modeling to create synthetic marketing data. So, for example, if I have a customer database and say there's 50,000 customers in it, and I want to lend it to you to do some analysis on, I cannot transmit any of the PII because those people under this new legislation have not consented to it. But what I can do is build a model of that data that has the same statistical patterns and then is essentially filled with dummy data, synthetic data. Instead of
Yeah.
Dave Armlin, it's like David
Yep.
Abacus.
Yep.
And then you would do your statistical transformations and modeling on that and hand us back essentially a software model, and then we can apply it to the production data without having to the source data to leave our custody. And critically, it protects the user's privacy and obeys the law. It obeys the letter of the law around consent, because the user did not consent for Chaos Search to access this data, but you can access the patterns within the data. So that's of strong interest, and that requires new and different skills, right? The ability to create very complex models with multiple algorithms embedded in it to fit all of the different statistical patterns. And, there's a lot of sophistication that frankly does not exist in the marketing profession from a data perspective
Right.
that vendors are going to have to provide, because otherwise, they'll need a button that says make a synthetic copy of this data in your
Yep.
CRM. Otherwise, for a lot of these folks, they will not be able to do the level of analysis on that they need to.
Got it. Well, that's very interesting. Certainly, we're a data platform, and we're working to comply with GDPR and all of the laws that are relevant to usage of our platform for any use, and help our customers do that. But it sounds like I wasn't aware to how this would impact your industry, and it sounds like you have a lot of domain expertise and ability where maybe creation of those synthetic data sets will be something that you could certainly productize. Chaos Search is a great platform for a lot of that work. Because cloud object storage is great from an economic perspective. You can iterate and test and create data sets very quickly. So if you do build product, I hope you would consider us. We can do a lot there. And it sounds like, relative to this law coming about, I know when I was before Chaos Search, I was at HubSpot. We were preparing for quite a while for GDPR to start to be enforced. Are folks getting ready for this California law in your space? And tell us a little about what you're seeing there, if you can.
Not as fast as they should be. Not as
Got
fast
it.
as they should be. So there's a lot of issues with essentially legal and compliance to make sure that the legal team for a company understands the level of risk,
Yep.
and then deems that risk high enough that they then collaborate with marketing to get it done, to adapt to the systems. And for some folks that may mean changing vendors. For other folks that may even mean not doing business in certain economic areas. So China has a new law that took effect this past year called PIPL, the Intellectual Property Protection Law. And it has similar restrictions to GDPR, but essentially, if you do business in China, it's one of those laws where they can hold the individual executives of a company criminally responsible for violation of it. So it's not just paying the fines. Like if you set foot on Chinese soil, you go into jail, and it's not
Yep.
the nice jail.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of heterogeneous laws that sort of a patchwork quilt of privacy laws. And so a big challenge for marketers is not necessarily the data itself, but the governance of it. And marketing has been notoriously bad at data governance for a very long time. Even something as simple as putting tracking codes on different kinds of campaigns so that you know which campaign drove results.
Right.
It's not been a strong point of a lot of folks in marketing.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. And as I mentioned earlier, getting prepared for GDPR, there's certainly with every law, there's interpretation of how you apply it, and the violations and fines that you can incur are pretty steep there. But won't compare to what you described with the Chinese law. That's certainly frightening. But I think as people start to take these things seriously, they have to think about that, and provide thinking about governance and providing a way where you can basically abide by the law. I think there's certainly opportunity for people to use products like Chaos Search to take data that they have all over their organization and get it to cloud object storage and understand what they have. Chaos Search does have great functionality relative to allowing you to analyze data at scale. So thinking back to the first part of your answer about the what versus the why, we see some opportunity there as well. And there are some interesting privacy concerns too, that we all are thinking about as consumers. Chaos Search can bring a great, the power of a lot of data together. So why you abandon that shopping cart, if you had a huge data set that might include weather and location, you could see that, oh, wow, a tornado, was 20 miles away from that person's home. And that might be why we had those abandoned shopping carts or other events like that. So building data lakes.
How do you prevent people? How do you prevent people from for example, using disallowed protected classes?
So, we don't
actually, or for inferred versions.
We don't necessarily police what our customers are doing with their data sets. We do provide capability where they could classify data and analyze their own use of it to make sure that they're adhering to it. So, but yeah, there's definitely, because we're a powerful data platform, and with any platform with a P, you have the opportunity for misuse. So we don't, as a company, as a SaaS vendor, we don't necessarily look at what people may be doing. We provide them the plumbing and the capability to analyze and make sure that they're adhering and classifying and using data in the appropriate way. And again, in some cases, there's some gray area as well. So like, log data is an example. We, typically log data might not contain PII or PHI, but occasionally it might leak in, and different companies take different approaches to how they tackle that. We again will provide transparency and tooling and the ability for people to kind of detect when they're doing certain things, but we're not going to go in and police it ourselves as a SaaS vendor.
Interesting. Because one of the things that we've had an issue with, mostly we have Facebook to thank for this, is inferred class issues, where I may not ask you your race or your age, but if
Right.
I know what books, movies, and TV shows you watch, right, and what your favorite stores are, I can probably create a synthetic variable that is predictive of race with like 99% accuracy. And
Yep.
then I'm using the synthetic variable to in a way that's essentially disallowed, right? You're not permitted in a certain context to discriminate on race, and yet
Yep.
I've created this inferred variable. And the thing that has me concerned, particularly with with a lot of all these different SaaS services, and I'm not saying that you do or don't do this, is nobody asks the question, is this allowable? Nobody asks the question, is this a good idea? It's the famous quote from Jurassic Park. Your scientists were so busy focusing on whether they could that they never stopped to think about whether they should. And so, to the extent that vendors, IBM is one of the leaders on this forefront, coming up with tooling to say, yeah, we think you have a bias here that may be disallowed. You might want to check out your data and make sure that you're not putting in something that that you shouldn't be, because right now nobody asks the question, and because nobody asks the question, nobody ever looks for the answer, and you end up building models that can have substantial negative effects on society.
Right. Yeah. No doubt. And certainly, every platform vendor doesn't want to enable those types of things to occur. And I do think that that type of, that's kind of a next wave of ethics we have related to the use of data and bias
Mm-hmm.
and negative uses. And I'd hope, I don't know the finer points of our privacy policy in this area, but I do think that this could be an emerging thing where, companies kind of flex their muscles on being good citizens on this front. And, I hope that Chaos Search will be that good citizen. So far, most of our intersection with privacy and these types of concerns have been around, is data staying in locale when it has to by law and those types of things. And again, we provide our customers, the proper plumbing and governance to know that they are when they need to, and when they don't need to, they aren't. There's some cost implications that certainly whenever you have to, maybe duplicate infrastructure to provide in locale capability, you're adding costs in some cases, and we're very transparent with it as a company. But I'm actually learning a bit from you today, Christopher, relative to, some of this inferred, capability and synthetic data. And man, that there's some pretty important topics there. And I'd hope that, it sounds like you have some understanding of the negatives on it. And, I think laws are coming together relative to privacy that are a little late, in my opinion. And I do hope that we start to see good citizens kind of, thinking back 10 or 15 years ago when we started thinking green and recycling. Like, I think their data privacy and some of the things that can be done with data and AI specifically, we have to kind of up our game here. So I'm happy to be learning from you a bit about this today.
One of the other interesting things, and this is something that you will definitely have to contend with at some point, is restrictions around dual use. One of the things that has been happening very recently as a discussion point is dual use technologies, particularly around AI and even data itself. Can data be have dual use capabilities where it can be misused, or I guess used differently, as a weapon, weaponized against a population? We obviously are seeing a lot of discussion around this because of the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. But the tools for things like cyber warfare are based on data collections, the ability for people to take data and use it in ways that were not necessarily intended. That's especially true of things like log data, right? Being able to parse enormous amounts of log data and find vulnerabilities.
Yep.
Uh, One person's tool to break into something is somebody else's security tool to do pen testing.
Yep.
And so I think in terms of ethics and stuff, one of the things that we're all going to have to confront sooner rather than later is, do we deem some technologies dual use, and then do you have export restrictions on your company? Because you have, if your software is as good as you hope it is, you would have to maybe block an entire nation like Russia from being able to use it.
Yeah, no doubt, and certainly to your point, when you have the ability to store everything, if you will, and that can be used for nefarious purposes. So we haven't really had what we think to be issues there, but we do have visibility. I did make the statement earlier that as a SaaS company, we don't police things. I do know from a higher level that if there were, for example, customers that were associated with the Russian government or things like that, we would have visibility into that. And I hope as a good citizen, we would do the right thing there relative to the use, where we would certainly follow the law. But there's also the ethics side of the equation. So I do think the dual use thing does intersect with what we're doing at Chaos Search for sure, and our customers. Because we have the ability, and we have customers that are indexing and getting value out of data at petabyte scale, multi-petabyte scale. That I don't know how many million times you need to copy the Library of Congress to get a petabyte, but a petabyte is an enormous quantity of data. We have customers that are routinely asking questions that are looking at data sets that are 500 billion data points and above, every day. So with that, I think what's the phrase? With great power comes great responsibility. So I think that you're right. We've got to think about that. I'm glad to say, as a 6 or so year old company, we haven't had any issues there, and we haven't, I think, not thought about it. But I think you're making me think about it more deeply, and certainly as you intersect with the Ukrainian war and invasion, certainly we all heard about Elon Musk sharing, Starlink capability, but immediately went to like, oh, that can be weaponized, and the person that's at the end of that, downlink is now a target.
Exactly. I mean, there's so many different aspects that, again, companies working with data, particularly when they don't have a CDO, when they don't have really good internal robust governance, there's a list of questions they don't contemplate, and there's a list of questions that in some cases they don't want to contemplate because it would mean costly, potentially restrictive things that they would have to do on the operations side to adhere to those best practices. I was watching an interview with Bob Iger from Disney the other day with Jon Stewart, and talking about media companies. He doesn't think there's a profitable business model in actually in actual journalism, because of the nature of the way advertising works and stuff. So there's, from a data perspective, we all have to think about how are we using our data, and more critically, the question that every white hat hacker always ask themselves is, how can this be misused, right? How
Right.
can I use this for something that I shouldn't be? And if you're not asking those questions, then you have a substantial governance problem internally, and it's something you need to remediate. And that's not something that a platform can do for you. That's something that you got to do for yourself, and you need to do it before you get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, no question about that. And certainly we're a platform that helps people, but with security use cases and data, use cases in general. But in either the white hat case or just more of a business use, you need a process in place and how you handle data and how you realize value from data, both from a business perspective or from a security perspective. And yeah, unfortunately, today there was a couple of companies that were hit and very hard and with security breaches, Okta being one of them, and then Microsoft, same group that hit both of them. One is going, their source code is being leaked, and another, their customer identity information is being shared. So I know both of those companies are great companies, and hope that the entry point for this situation has been closed. And as a company, Chaos Search, we intersect with a lot of those end users, so we're certainly here to help. But to your point, security is more of a process, and what one might consider a value stream, another considers it to be an attack vector. So your point is spot on in terms of people being aware of and have a process for being secure. Awesome. I guess back to the marketing analytics space. What are some trends that you're excited about? As we leave the online, we're all kind of sequestered and locked away due to the pandemic, and getting out and about. Are there new things in your world that are exciting on the other side of the economy returning to normal and more standard life?
Well, I would have those things if that was actually the case, but since January of 2020, I've sort of made keeping track of the pandemic my personal hobby.
Yep.
I full disclaimer, I am in absolutely positively no way a medical professional of any kind,
Sure.
but I have been doing a daily newsletter on it. And we are now encountering, I think it's wave 5 with the Omicron BA2 variant,
Yep.
which has the ability to do things like immune escape. And so the calls for business to as usual and back to normal, I think, are premature.
Yep.
It also does not help that both Umair Haque and a few other folks have said, pretty and documented pretty convincingly, we're pretty much in the middle of World War III now. Those two things, I think, create tremendous amounts of uncertainty. So
Sure.
the guidance we would give, even just from a marketing perspective, is that you need to be focused on not trying to forecast the future, because you can't, right? Everyone who has data from before April of 2020, that data is useless. That world is gone.
Yep.
It doesn't exist anymore.
Yep.
And that's every single industry. And now, the continued struggles that we all have with supply chain issues and random shortages and things that don't make a whole lot of sense, plus the things we know are going to happen, are going to substantially constrain our capabilities. Real simple example: Ukraine is a substantial producer of platinum, the metal. Platinum is used in automotive, but it's also used heavily in chip making. And when you have a supply shock to the system, the ability to make those chips without mining up more platinum from other parts of the planet is going to be constrained, which means your compute costs go up, which and so on and so forth. So our guidance is to folks from a strategic perspective is there is no such thing as certainty right now. There's some seasonality, but you need to be much more focused on real-time and near real-time data and looking at what's happening in the very recent past, because the past is not very helpful right now. The future is a wild toss-up as to what's going to happen tomorrow. Vladimir Putin deploys tactical nuclear weapons. That's a non-zero possibility. We can't predict that, and so we just have to tell people, your data needs to be near real time. Your marketing, your plans, your analytics, all should be near real time, and you should be giving weight towards what's happened recently versus what has happened in the distant past.
Got it. Yeah. Well, you definitely. I'm an ultimate optimist, but I don't disagree that certainly the Omicron variants, and I know China is having their largest uptick in infection and dealing with that it's not behind us, and hadn't really thought about it relative to your point about data pre 2020. I definitely think it's certainly a new world, and it sounds like you have some great tactical ideas about dealing with near real time, and maybe there's some ways that you're talking about imputed data where maybe the old data you can apply some algorithms to it with all the uncertainty that maybe you can help guide companies in the right place. Certainly Chaos Search, we love the login event use case. We are starting to see, marketing data in our platform being utilized in cross-reference with, basically operational data. So, things that, may help companies weather, the uncertainty that we have, or modeling what they can do with the future that does have a lot of uncertainty. Certainly, don't mean to dispel the danger that the Ukrainian war can bring. As I think Biden's going to head over to Poland, and certainly the proximity to NATO countries. It's a challenge I don't think we've seen since NATO was formed. So it sounds like you're guiding your customers in the right direction relative to the uncertainty there. And I'm optimistic because I'm back in an office after here in Boston after a couple of years working in my office above my garage in southern Maine. So maybe I'm overblowing the optimism. I'm going to knock on wood that the best case scenario can happen in Europe, and that certainly that our medical professionals and the researchers at great companies like Moderna and J&J and all the others that are trying to make us safe, that can play out in the best case scenario as well. Well, Christopher,
here's hoping.
Yeah, I really appreciate the time you spent with us today. I'm going to I prefer Dave Abacus to Dave Armlin. I think that's a pretty cool pseudonym. I do hope that your customers, can make use of this conversation today, and our customers at Chaos Search can think about some of the things that you've raised relative to data and marketing and tooling with R and BigQuery and the open source tools that you've mentioned. So, any parting words for the Data Legends podcast team here, or anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to cover today?
The thing that we need to keep in mind is that data is one of 4 critical parts, right? So when you're cooking, you need a recipe, you need ingredients, you need appliances and tools, and you need a chef with skills, right? Data is an ingredient. So you still need a data chef, right? With skills. You need the right tools, and you need a recipe. And if you don't have those other things, it doesn't matter how good or bad the data is, right? If the chef can't cook, the ingredients don't matter, and vice versa, right? The best chef in the world and the best tools in the world, if I give you a 50-pound bag of sand, nobody's eating, right? It doesn't matter how awesome the tool is, you've got a bowl of sand. And so remember that data is part of a holistic ecosystem, right? It's part of a complete breakfast, as the commercial goes, and you need all of those parts to make it work. And if you have questions about those parts and things, and you'd like some advice, obviously, on the tooling side, people can check out Chaos Search, and for everything else, pop on over to TrustInsights.ai.
Awesome. So in addition to the website, is there a Twitter handle or other ways to follow Christopher Penn?
You can find me personally at ChristopherSPenn.com, but for all of the work stuff we talked about, TrustInsights.ai. And of course, there's all the social links and stuff on those sites and things. So, all right. It's pretty easy to find.
Super. Well, hey, thank you again for your time today. And we're neighbors here in Boston, so hopefully our paths will cross. And thanks again for your time today, Christopher.
No problem. You have a great day and stay safe.
Absolutely. Take care. Thank you.